The purpose of this session is to briefly cover the differences and value of Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop, along with providing guidance on how to migrate to either or both Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. This agenda is 25 minutes long, and I'll explain AVD in Windows 365, demonstrate how easy it is to create a cloud PC. I'll overview the 3 different deployment options of Azure Virtual Desktop, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Swathi, who will talk about AVD deployment. Then she'll turn it over to Klaus to talk about the migration, and then come back to me at the end, and I'll take us home with some final considerations and closing comments. Gartner recently released for the first time the Magic Quadrant for DaaS, and Microsoft was named the leader. I provided a great link in there in order to learn more and read about our blog. There are 3 different ways that Microsoft delivers Windows to its customers. The native PC experience that we're accustomed to. Cloud VDI, with Azure Virtual Desktop or AVD, and Cloud PC on a device with Windows 365. The first, on the far left side of the screen, is probably the one you're quite familiar with, so let's spend some time on the other 2. Azure Virtual Desktop has become a game changer for organizations who are looking at a cost-effective Cloud VDI solution. If you have in-house VDI experience, this is a very powerful way to meet the new hybrid work strategies. It allows you to enable more secure remote desktops and provides maximum flexibility and control without compromising the security. Additionally, Azure Virtual Desktop comes with many ways to reduce costs, leveraging exclusively Windows 11 and Windows 10 multi-session, which allows multiple users on a single virtual machine. So the key words here to think about are those left in the bottom center of this slide. Azure Virtual Desktop really shines when we're thinking about flexibility and control. On the far right-hand side, we have something a little bit different. Windows 365 is a software as a service, or SaaS, solution. It combines the power and security of the cloud with the familiarity of a physical PC experience. Employees stream the full Windows, personalized, persistent desktop experience from the cloud to any device, anywhere. Windows 365 does not require any sort of VDI expertise. The words VDI and easy never went together until Windows 365. Let's take that one level deeper. AVD is Cloud VDI. What that means is the same options that you're used to with RDS, pooled multi-session deployments, or personal desktops, or remote apps, are available with Azure Virtual Desktop. It's a lift and shift of what you're doing. The same server SKUs are available, plus the Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session images. There is no CAL requirement when using AVD with the Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session images. That's correct. No CALs are required when you're using that with AVD. Windows 365 is a SaaS offering. That terminology can be overloaded often. I like to explain it in comparing Exchange on-premise and Exchange online. And the value of going from Exchange on-prem to Exchange online, that simple assigning a license and in a couple minutes a mailbox is available. That's the power of what a SaaS offering is. And so you can think about the value prop equal to what Windows 365 did for VDI deployments. So what does that all mean? So what I like to do is land the plane. A cloud PC is created by Intune on the Azure Fabric. The management control plane is Intune, and you govern, manage, and control and deploy a cloud PC in the same way you would with a physical PC. So all the same applications are applicable, settings and configurations. It's fundamentally an equivalent of a persistent personal desktop. And so at this point, you're wondering, okay, which one do I choose? Well, you don't, because AVD and Windows 365 are complementary. I like to use a different reference to OneDrive and SharePoint. I have a file. Do I put it on OneDrive or do I put it on SharePoint? What's the value of putting it on SharePoint versus OneDrive? And so you can think about the differences in comparison to that of how OneDrive and SharePoint are complementary of each other, while Windows 365 and AVD are complementary of each other also. So that's a whole lot of words said. For those that like a compare slide, here's a good comparison slide. Let me make it simple. Windows 365 for personal desktops, Azure Virtual Desktop for remote apps and multi-session pooled deployments. Complementary. Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop can be deployed side by side to meet customer needs. In fact, it's the most common scenario with Windows 365 and AVD that we see among our customers and organizations today. The energy and excitement of Windows 365 is evident. Every keynote from Satya in the last 2 years, he's talked about Windows 365. Cloud PC is a new category of devices. It is much more than just a VM running in Azure. Let me demonstrate how easy it is to create a cloud PC. Here I am at the Intune Management Portal. I'm going to navigate to Devices and the Windows 365 node. Here along the top are some tabs. I'm going to click on Provisioning Policies, create a policy, and again, 4 simple questions. I'm just going to name it. I'm going to select Enterprise. Frontline, we'll talk about it another time in another session. The first decision you need to make is your join type, either Microsoft Entra Join or Hybrid Join. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to pick Entra Join. For a network, you need to pick which type of network you want to deploy your cloud PCs into. You could use one of our free Microsoft hosted networks, or you could bring an Azure subscription and your own network. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to pick a Microsoft hosted network. The beauty and benefit of this is that no Azure subscription is required. All that you need is a cloud PC license and Intune. I'm going to pick a geography. You can more granularly select a region, but I'm going to select automatic. I'm going to click SSO. Now you got to select an image. We've already defaulted to the latest image, Windows 11 Enterprise with Microsoft 365 apps with feature update 22H2. You can change that if you desire to one of our other gallery images that we keep updated on a monthly basis. Click Next. The next decision that you may want to make is if you want any localized versions. We provide the capability to fully localize the experience. For example, if I chose Polish, when we create the cloud PC, the Polish language pack for Windows will be installed. And if you chose the M365 apps image like I did before, M365 apps will be fully localized. And so what that provides is a fully localized experience when the user logs onto their cloud PC for the first time. And lastly, you just need to assign that to a group. Now, I did not demonstrate the licensing assignment. Here, you just need to assign your provisioning policy to a specific group in Entra ID. And then after that, in about 30 minutes to an hour, whether it's 1, 10, 100, or thousands, your cloud PCs will be created for you. That's how simple Windows 365 is. Now, transitioning to Azure Virtual Desktop, there are 3 deployment options for Azure Virtual Desktop. We've got our Quick Start, which is formerly known as Getting Started. You could create a host pool, our default way, or use the landing zone accelerator. The Quick Start is great for test drive for familiarization. It is not recommended for production deployments. You can use the Create a Host Pool. This is our standard deployment option for Azure Virtual Desktop. Or use LZA, or Landing Zone Accelerator. This is a fully guided deployment experience. And to talk more about LZA, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Swathi.
Thank you, Eric, for providing an overview of the LZA and other deployment options. Now let me start with the migration. We see some common patterns in the triggers that are creating a sense of urgency to migrate IT estates to the cloud. And I'm sure some of these resonate with you as well, and are directly correlated to the business priority of the organizations. Some see a data center contract renewal as the ideal time to rethink where and how they host and operate their applications, infrastructures, and databases to leverage the elastic economies, scale, and security capabilities of the cloud. Some customers are looking to reduce their CapEx spend for optimized accounting to execute and maintain their IT priorities. The answer to all of these compelling questions is anchored on one operational priority that we believe needs to rise to the top of the list: migrating data, infra, and application estates to Azure with speed and quality. This is a factory-style delivery service that will deliver rehost migration of AVD workloads to Azure PaaS and IaaS through unified CSU resources at zero cost for the implementation efforts, and will cover entire lifecycle for rehost migration of eligible workloads across pre-migration, migration, and post-migration activities. As we can see from the description in the slide, our execution model is a joint one with the customer, including joint governance. So without further ado, let's start with a simple question. What is a landing zone accelerator? Before we dive in, let's draw an analogy with the construction of a house. Let's imagine you're in the market looking for a beautiful house. Once you have decided on the budget and by when, top of mind are some foundational considerations. Like for example, are you looking to use this house as a residence or as an office space? Are you looking to buy in the United States or elsewhere? The responses to questions like these will inform you of the kind of plumbing needs, electrical needs, and material requirements for your specific use case. Like for instance, whether the electricity that is required is 110 volts or 220 volts. Over time, some of these considerations have become best practices and in other cases, laws that governments adhere to for their region. Using this analogy for Microsoft Azure, you've made a decision about when you want to move your workload and your budget. Fantastic. Now we have the foundational considerations, wherein you assess what's the best way to set up the session host, the networking stack, the management groups, management subscriptions, the application groups, host pools. How do you ensure business continuity per your organization's requirement? What's the best way to monitor your workload? This is where the Azure Landing Zone provides you with a set of scalable, compliant, flexible, and secure best practices to accelerate the onboarding of your workload to Azure. Azure Landing Zones in the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure are designed to accelerate efforts to map, modernize, or even reimagine the operating model. Azure Landing Zones help build a cloud environment aligned to the optimal technology operations specific to your needs in the cloud. We'll talk about how these best practices can be catered, tweaked, adjusted, and leveraged for your unique scenario. The Azure Virtual Desktop Landing Zone Accelerator provides you with a reference architecture and reference implementation for your workload's unique foundational requirements, and each scenario aims to represent common customer experiences with the goal of accelerating the process of developing and deploying for ABD. So, Azure Landing Zone Accelerator is a subset of the Azure Landing Zone, wherein 50% of it is derived from, and the 30% of it is ABD specific, and 20% built through feedback and is a trusted technical guidance. Enterprise scale is an architecture approach and reference implementation that enables construction and operationalization of landing zones on Azure at scale and aligned with the Azure roadmap and the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure, and provides prescriptive guidance coupled with Azure best practices, and it follows design principles across the critical design areas for the customer's Azure environment. These are the chief design areas that are covered as part of the Landing Zone Accelerator. The impact of decisions made within these critical design areas will reverberate across enterprise scale architecture and influence other decisions. This guidance builds on several Cloud Adoption Framework enterprise scale landing zone architectural principles and recommendations to manage network topology and connectivity at scale, for example, depending on the requirements like egress or ingress, for instance. The Azure Virtual Desktop Accelerator can be used as the initial deployment for ABD in the enterprise environment, and you can develop and customize the code to expand its functionality, adapting to your enterprise scale Azure Landing Zones environment. So there are two types of deployment: greenfield, where end-to-end deployment happens for ABD, and brownfield deployments, where there's already a cloud and we aid in expanding through providing modules. And Landing Zone is a massive bundle of all these capabilities that we collate and provide as part of the open source. And the ABD LZA includes an open source collection of Azure Resource Manager, Bicep, and Terraform automation to set up your Azure Virtual Desktop environment quickly following best practices and the Cloud Adoption Framework. And it will create an ABD environment including virtual machines, virtual networks, and storage in Azure, and can be deployed using integration into your CI/CD pipelines, the command line PowerShell, or Azure CLI or Azure Portal deployments, of which, again, there are two types. One is the custom image build, and the other is the Accelerator baseline. And the LZA gives a click-through approach for deployment, which is automated, which is simple, fast, and scalable within minutes. And this is available on the GitHub repo shared earlier, which is the reference implementation. The LZA represents the strategic design path and target technical state for AVD deployment, and the solution provides an architectural approach and reference implementation to prepare landing zone subscriptions for a scalable AVD deployment. It has quick links to each of the deployment types, provides recommendations and considerations, and in-depth troubleshooting guidance for common challenges that are encountered. With that, I'll hand it over to Klaus, who will now talk about the migration principles.
Thank you so much, Swati. Great to see the level of automation that can be built around or is built around and provided for Azure Virtual Desktop. So what I'd like to talk to you about now is to guide you through some migration principles. So while the landing zone accelerator gives you a lot of best practices, I think it's good to know where you start from and where you are going to end up with. So if you are new as a customer entirely to the virtualization space or to the VDI space and don't have any pre-existing infrastructure in this area, the easiest path for you would be to start out with Windows 365. It gives your end user a personal and very familiar Windows experience based on Windows 11, and they can just use it from any device everywhere. If you are using VDI today on premises or on a partner-based solution or in another cloud, or you use traditional Windows-based RDS, remote desktop services, there are a few things that you need to look into to decide if you're going to use Windows 365 in the future, or if you're going to use Azure Virtual Desktop in the future, or if you combine the power and the strengths of both products and use them both in your organization. Some of those things and questions that you need to ask yourself is, do I want to offer personal desktops to my users, so dedicated one-to-one relationships? Then Windows 365 is the best and first choice for you. Do I have skilled resources in-house, people that can operate a VDI infrastructure? And do I want to have that flexibility and maximum level of control about how I build out that infrastructure, how I build out the networking, the plumbing underneath it, like Swati described it in her house analogy? Then AVD might be a good fit for you. What kind of offerings do I want to provide? Do I want to provide remote apps, or do I want to provide maybe a highly efficient multi-session experience? Then AVD is an option. And both can be perfectly combined. So for example, users get a personal experience through Windows 365 and then get specific line of business applications streamed into that via remote app. So all of those are at your disposal, and it's really depending on what are your key business drivers to make those decisions in the direct solution that you're going to deploy. So as Eric pointed out in the beginning, Windows 365 and AVD offer some very unique values. With AVD, and this is in the middle of this slide, Cloud VDI, Azure Virtual Desktop, and also our partner solutions from Citrix and VMware build or offer you the capability to build your own VDI solution in the cloud, and also harnessing the infrastructure that Microsoft or Citrix and VMware provide to take care about brokering and secure connectivity and managing of the underlying infrastructure. And this gives you kind of a middle ground solution between I do everything by myself in my own data center and standing up servers and storage and all that kind of things, and the maximum level of simplicity which we have with our SaaS offering and Windows 365. So depending on how you want to dial that in your specific organization, you have the full choice of offerings from Microsoft. So diving even deeper into that. So what do you need to do and need to understand when you come from an on-premises RDS or VDI environment to Cloud VDI, to Azure Virtual Desktop? So usually things that you're looking in, how do you build your images today? How do you deploy your VMs? How do you update your VMs? Do you want to deploy and offer personal persistent desktops, or do you want to deploy multi-session or pooled virtual desktop? which OS do you use today? Do you use Windows 10? Do you use Windows Server? And how are your profiles managed? Where are your users storing their data? Those are the areas that you're going to look into when considering a transition over into Azure Virtual Desktop. And with Azure Virtual Desktop, we have solutions for all of those areas. Swati showed the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator because in the cloud, it's really all about automation. And the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator and all of our scripts that we developed and offered to you via ARM and Bicep templates will help you to automate and deploy even the largest environments for Azure Virtual Desktop. And what we also have when it comes to managing the image and creating your template that you use in your organization, we also have now the custom image template as a feature directly integrated natively in the Azure portal AVD experience. So check that out as well. And then in Azure Virtual Desktop, we offer, like you know that from your on-premises environment, we offer personal host pools and we offer pooled host pools based on, for example, Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session, which is a unique offering in Azure that you are able to use and giving your users a full familiar Windows 11 experience by still harnessing the efficiency of running multiple users of the same operating system. And with Windows 365 coming from a traditional VDI infrastructure, this is really the opportunity for you to look at and assess your current environment. Today, you might be using Active Directory or hybrid Azure Active Directory join or Entra ID join. You might set up and connect your VMs to an Azure network or to an on-premises network, and you use custom golden images. You still might be on Windows 10, use group policies and SCCM to configure the whole environment, and maybe your users store the data on network shares or home drives. They are still a thing. Windows 365 gives you really the opportunity to modernize and adopt cloud-native approaches for all of those areas. You can now use native Entra ID join for the Windows 365 cloud PCs and leverage single sign-on and even passwordless through FIDO tokens and Windows Hello for Business to sign in and authenticate in a secure way. It's really about adopting the zero trust principles by removing the endpoint devices from your company network. You can just use the Microsoft hosted network and then use maybe a secure access solution for specific applications only connect back to your on-premises environment or to your business apps. So this really helps you to get more secure by adopting Windows 365 in your organization going forward. With Windows 365, we also provide pre-configured gallery images that you can just use and then use Intune to deploy your applications to. So there's not necessarily a need to build your custom image, but still you can do that. And you can also leverage the Azure Virtual Desktop custom image template feature to build a custom image for your organization and then leverage it for Windows 365. So this is again showing how those two products work together. And Windows 365 gives you also an opportunity to move to Windows 11, give your users a Windows 11 experience as quickly as possible without worrying about running maybe large-scale physical deployment projects in your organization. And everything is managed through Intune. So whatever you may be already using in Intune to manage your physical devices and your mobile devices, you can now use as well for Windows 365. And last but not least, the user data that your end users store on your devices, OneDrive for Business is really the go-to solution. If your users already use OneDrive for Business today, they will just seamlessly have access to that data in Windows 365. So as soon as they log in, their OneDrive will sync and they have access to all their files and folders that they are used to have on their local device. And if you still rely on Windows-based file server infrastructure, we also have great solutions for that to use Azure Files and Azure File Sync to get those data over into Azure. Yeah, so to summarize, the tools that can help you move into the cloud, move into Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365, and they are universal. So use OneDrive for Business to store the user data, leverage the known folder move feature to redirect also the desktop, the documents, the pictures of your users into OneDrive for Business. And then this all will be available both in AVD and Windows 365. And the user, and this is really where they care much about, is have access to their data and apps. And OneDrive for Business gives that. Another key element of a good user experience is that the users want to retain their bookmarks and favorites from their browser. So enable Edge settings sync on your physical endpoints, and then those will come over into the cloud PC or in AVD. So the user does not need to recreate anything, or you need to go through manual copy processes of those favorites and bookmarks. I already mentioned Azure File Sync to move SMB network shares into the cloud. And I also mentioned the custom image template feature that allows you to build customized corporate images in your environment. But I'd like to call out also the utility Intune WinApp util that allows you to take your existing Win32 apps that you might have in SCCM or in another system to convert them into packages for Intune, and then use them to deploy that to Windows 365 or also to AVD, because you can also manage Azure Virtual Desktop through Intune as well and deploy applications via that mechanism. So this was all about the tools that can help you move into Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. With that, I now hand it over to Eric.
Thanks, Klaus. Here are some closing thoughts and considerations. Intune can manage Azure Virtual Desktop hosts. Consider Entra joining both pooled and personal desktop hosts. Then you'll leverage Intune as the management control plane to deliver policies and configurations, because you don't have GPO when you Entra join those devices. Recently, we just announced both FSLogix and Azure Virtual Desktop ADMX are available in Intune settings catalog. For AVD, realize that you will need to upskill and learn how to perform IT in Azure. You will learn how to create virtual networks and site-to-site VPNs and to get familiar with Azure storage. Azure might seem daunting initially, so start small and realize that you need to upskill in these areas. Windows 365 is simple and super easy. I demonstrated that easier. Even a desktop admin can do it. But AVD is just as easy. AVD will require a greater knowledge, and I just spoke about that earlier. Windows 365 does not require an Azure subscription when using Entra joined and hosted networks. This makes it really easy to onboard, like I demonstrated. For AVD, you will need to fine-tune your AVD scaling plans to balance host availability and cost management, since AVD is a metered service. You don't want to leave your car running in your driveway all the time. You turn it off. In the same way, you want to adjust your AVD scaling plans. Engage your organization's desktop and admins. Those are your Intune and configuration manager administrators. They'll know Entra ID, they'll know device management. If you're unfamiliar or you're no skilled in Intune, this will be paramount and very important as you evaluate Windows 365. Lastly, engage and leverage your fast track benefit for onboarding assistance. This includes both Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. Something that we would like to offer you are free trial licenses for Windows 365. There's a link, aka.ms TTWCX08, Tango Tango Whiskey Charlie X-Ray 08. Submit your request for trial licenses, and that's a great way to begin your evaluation of Windows 365. Again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Swathi. Thank you, Klaus. Hope you enjoyed this session. Stay sunny, and we'll talk to you soon.